why is sexuality or sex important? Why is it even worthy? Like, what's it going to do for us? What's the good of it? What does it change? How does it change our life? If I have 10 other things I need to choose from, how do I know to position that? Especially if you've never had sex that most people consider good sex or pleasure-filled sex.
You have to understand that you are worth the exploration of what you want.
Yeah, you have to believe that you're worth it.
Hi, I'm Dr. Vonda Wright, and this is Hot for Your Health. Join us for conversations on the bleeding edge of science, health, and culture as we bring you tech innovators, thought leaders, and the movers and shakers who are transforming science fiction into your new health reality.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Hot for Your Health. I'm Dr. Vonda Wright, and every week I get to talk to fascinating people, movers and shakers, and sometimes my friends. And this is a week that I get to talk to someone who's not only my friend, but an expert in her field. Dr. Juliana Hauser is a licensed couples and family therapist, licensed professional counselor, and bona fide sexpert. And I have found her approach, whether talking to her, whether listening to her in her TED Talk, in the media that she does, or now in her new book, The New Position on Sex, not only an expert, but completely and totally approachable. And I think that's why you help so many people. Dr. Juliana, thank you so much for coming with me today.
Oh, it's so good to see you.
You know, this book has been in your heart and soul for years, and I watched you go through the travail that takes years off of an author's life.
Yes.
To bring what you knew, to bring all the feelings into the covers. And I have to tell you, I also watched the travail of naming it. But how clever are you? A New Position on Sex. But this book is so much, not just about positions about sex. It's so not that, right? Because I know you are so holistic in your approach. What is at the core of this book?
I think the core of it is we have to look at what the concept of sexuality is really different if we want to change our sexual culture to a culture that isn't so toxic and negative and actually is kind of the roots of what we've known as humans for thousands of years and have gotten away from. And so that would be like the ultimate, like we just have to start looking at it differently. And we've seen the problems that have occurred when we haven't looked at it differently. So there's that. And the second part of it is I want to give people the framework of once you buy into there needs to be a different way of looking at this.
Yes.
And we hear in the media, we hear everywhere about sex is so important. Sex is so important in our relationships. And we are given sex tips on how to do the functionality of things. But what we're not given is the framework in which to understand who we are as a sexual being and what we really are wanting for ourselves, and if we're partnered with anyone else, with our partner. And so I find a lot of people at this crossroads of, I agree, this needs to change. I want more than sex tips. I want something deeper than that, but I have no idea where to start and what you're even talking about. I believe you, but also what are you talking about? And so this book is what I'm talking about.
So I think that sometimes, especially because we receive virtually zero sex education in this country, we are talking about a performative physical act. But I know that where you come from, it starts with our brain and our attitudes and identifying meaning, and can culminate in an act or multiple acts, but that's not the heart and soul of it, is it?
Correct. Yeah, it isn't. It is to me, and I use the phrase that sexuality is our final frontier of self-development. It is in my view, and through the work that I've been doing on this, it is sexuality holistically is the best expression of who we are, the truest form of the essence and the core of us. And sexuality is one of the most powerful pathways to learn who you are. So it's a both and. It's an expression of and it's a pathway towards. And we just aren't taught that. And if you are hearing that and only thinking like sex acts, then it's, of course, that's what you're thinking because that's what we've been taught. But I'm saying, no. That statement makes a whole lot more sense. Like after you've gone through the framework, after you've listened to me talk, after you've read the book, you realize I'm talking about like the 9 pillars of sexuality that I believe in are really a way of looking at yourself from a 360 point of view. It's all of you.
Why do you, let's unpack that. Why do you think it's the truest sense of you or a true pathway to knowing yourself? Because some people out there are going to be like, what?
I know. I was like that too. And I think in some ways if I can adopt this philosophy and feel just vehement about it, then you can too. But I started off pretty hesitant as well. But let's start with something that we all have in common. We've all been exposed to, even just the concept of virginity. And when you hear the concept, the words surrounding it are you're giving up something. It was taken, and it's something special and precious. And if you were to dive into it deeper, and I'll take away like the religious connotation of that phrasing, but just the deeper part of what we say is meaningful in the sex act, a lot of what we're talking about is that there is an underlying belief, even if the details are different, that when we share ourselves sexually with ourselves or with somebody else, that we know there's something sacred and bigger at hand here. And it's interesting because the word virgin, really the roots of it means someone who is whole into themselves. And so that ended up getting twisted through the centuries of something was taken from you, you're no longer whole if you had had a sex act. And obviously there's all sorts of other historical reasons that has become an archaic point of view. But if you take away all the things that humans have put onto that and go back to the meaning that we've always thought there is something different in sharing ourselves sexually, that's what I'm speaking about. That there is something in an energetic change. You can even look at the science of it. There's something that we are exchanging energy and fluid wise that is different than other interactions. So there's that part. There's the biology and the science, and then I think even just like more of a woo-woo way of looking at it. And then I think it is also, when we become more current day in this, it is such a complicated concept and part of our like human dynamics. There are politics involved, there is media involved, there's religion involved, there's micro ways of looking at yourself through like your relationships, and then there's the macro of like how does your sexuality fit into the greater world, and there's all these emotions and values, and you have to sift through so much that it creates, looking at, like we were just talking about workouts earlier, to sift out just who you are as a sexual being is its own workout. And it is a very difficult workout. So if we go back to like the Spartan race that we ran together a couple years ago, there was a way to go through that you stayed, you could do it kind of surface. There wasn't necessarily people at each thing, really like preventing you from moving on. Some of it was harder than others. But at the end, no matter who you were in the beginning and how you decided to go through it, at the end, there was something momentous that happened at the end. Perhaps it was the medal that I give you, or a group of friends, or whatever it is. If you were to use that as a metaphor for going through yourself as a sexual being, you can choose to not have an examination of who you are holistically as being this huge, excavating work, or you can choose to do every single one of those Spartan obstacles, right? And examine who are you in that. I remember when I was doing the Spartan race part, I went to we had to go up the ropes, and someone was videotaping me when I did it, and I don't even if I lasted 10 seconds. And I was like, well, okay, well, that is clearly a place I need to work moving ahead. And I had the choice of ignoring that, or doing something about it after the race.
Mm-hmm.
And but it's so much more sanctioned. Like, can you imagine if we had a sexuality course like
Right.
that thousands of people were going to, and you get medals at the end of it? Look how much different we would be if we had a priority that was normalizing the examination of who we were as a sexual being rather than just the physicality of it. And that's what I'm saying, that if you are going to do the hard work, because it is learning to crawl, really is where we're starting part, because we're not giving much education, which we talked about previously, is you're going to learn skills, you're going to grow muscles, and you're going to have new parts of yourself that come out if you go to each one of those obstacles and spend the time in it, and aren't afraid of what you're going to discover, and aren't afraid to ask for support and resources in that. And because it's one of the last places that people go, it's one of the last places that people want to spend the time, because they feel like it's a luxury, not a necessity.
Well, and because of the emotions that it drudges up. But I wanted to go back. I mean, you started this with all the origins of the word virgin as meaning whole unto yourself, and the way that something passes that's different than merely, throwing a baseball or something, or having a friendship relationship. Do you think this kind of conversation, I know what you think, but I want to explore it. This conversation of exploration is equally XX and XY, or male and female? And at what age are we ready? Are hormones not quite raging enough, but not yet dead? I mean, unpack some of that for me, because when you think about taking this view of self-development, I'm going to arbitrarily, generically, and unfairly say it's probably women that are going to do some of this work, if at all, right? So, yeah.
I agree that a lot of topics, women end up doing a lot of the initial lifting, and do a lot of the emotional load of it. And if they're partnered with a man, that the man can get along and do it with her, or she's going to leave. And I think it is very common. And I often say that when I'm doing work, when a woman is partnered with somebody and only she's doing it, is like, you will be different at the end of this work. And you need to have a conversation with your partner now of, does that person want to come along with you or not in this journey? And you need to know what you're getting into in this, because it's going to be something so different. I also would say that, my work began with women in college, and I was just really interested in that developmental time of life. Kind of talking about what your second question, which is like, developmentally, where is the best place to do this? And my thought was college, and or at least in those early 20s, when you've done the individuating, you are leaving your family of origin, and you're still haven't figured out who you are. I thought, oh, what a perfect place to do this. And the feedback I got over and over again, it must have been 98% of my students at the time said, I wish I'd gotten this earlier.
Really?
Yeah, like, they would say, even freshmen would say, my college would be so different if I had gotten this in high school. And I've done it in high school, and like, gosh, I wish I'd gotten this in middle school. Now, I would say that's where it ends, because about a month ago, I taught in middle school, and they were like, "This is a lot. This is a lot." And so I think that's the threshold is middle school, and which is fine. I mean, everything has to be age appropriate.
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
And the thing, though, is that we aren't taught. And this is where, a lot of places where I think our work overlaps, is we're not taught how to age at all, let alone our sexuality. We have not been given, you and I have had conversations about aging mentors, and, I really believe in that concept, but where is our sexuality aging mentors? It's even down to biology.
Other than your mentor, who you've told me about in the past, I don't know of any other sexual health mentors, right?
Right. Yeah. And I feel profoundly grateful that she led and was proactive in saying to me, do you want to know about what it's like to age sexually? Do you want to know what it looks like? Do you want to know what it sounds like? And she wasn't saying it was, and her name is Betty Dotson. She wasn't saying my way of aging is the way it's going to happen and should happen. She's saying, do you want to just have an example?
Yeah.
And I'm not sure I would have ever asked. I didn't think at that point I was young enough that it didn't even occur to me that it was something for me to learn and to know, and how much things were going to change, because we're not educated on how much things can change
Right.
and how we have to get ahead of things. We just didn't know.
Well, and I think this is a perfect segue to a space, because I want to get to some of your 9 pillars of holistic sexuality, sensuality, desire, and pleasure. But this is a perfect time to intersect an area that I've seen you jump into in the last couple years, and that is the profound changes that happen in midlife due to the biology of estrogen walking out the door. Whether we come to menopause through the natural attrition of our ovaries, whether we come to it early through hysterectomy or surgical or breast cancer treatment, let alone talking about a new position on sex, it complicates the whole arena. So how have you seen women talk about this to you? Now it hurts when at least it never hurt before. There's so much to talk about here.
Yeah, and because the age group now that is going through perimenopause and menopause, we're not educated at all, really, and so of course we're walking into midlife with just such small education, and what education we have was not with the internet. We were doing, our sexual lives were beginning before the internet was there, so we were relying on our family. We were reliant on anyone that we were exposed to. And
I
so
read Masters and Johnson's from the library.
I love it. Vonda, you're cutting edge.
I felt a little titillated, but I shouldn't have. It was a science book, for God's sake. Right.
And of course you were, because that is the only access that we really had. We're in textbook form, and we weren't given anything that was really that relatable. So any exposure was going to feel exciting. Yeah. I mean, mine was opposite. I was a hustler at our neighbors. Our neighbors underneath his sink, a friend found a stack, and that was a different kind of education. But it was equally uninformative and unrelatable to who we were and what we were needing. And so going back to perimenopause and menopause, I mean, we're building the plane as it's taking off in a lot of ways. We've made a huge headways, and we're, I'm so grateful the conversation has changed. But as you know, the stats with how research is going, if you siphon it down to what research is happening with sexuality and perimenopause and menopause, it's just virtually non-existent, and that has to change. And luckily it is. So now we have to rely a lot on anecdotal, and in my practice and the work that I do, I see a wide range. I see it from it happened out of nowhere. I probably the most common thing is the change of libido and desire, and not really understanding what happened and feeling like a switch was just pulled. But then also, when asked the right questions, realizing it wasn't as sudden as it felt. It snuck up on everyone, and then intersected with a whole lot of other life things happening. And so it makes it really difficult to know really what the origin was. I have yet to come across a woman that I've worked with that it was one thing that changed her libido and desire, which to me, coming from a mental health aspect, it's if one thing didn't change it, that for sure means the solution and the way that we're going to go about it is not going to be one thing, that it needs to be coming at it from multiple places. And for a lot of us, we're combating a lot of symptoms that it's like, oh, can't you just give me this tip that's going to fix it all? Like, is it one? You're right.
If I could, yeah.
Yes,
Right.
yeah. And so I think a lot of what I do is I sit alongside the grieving that happens of this happening. For a lot of women, they feel like their body is betraying them, even in the sexual realm, and then they're having a hard time getting support to being taken seriously in it. I want to give another example outside of just like the details of how a sexual life will change, but how important it is to go through the age span of getting comfortable with who you are sexually. So we know that the stats are that in nursing homes, that one of the highest rates reasons why women die in nursing homes is UTIs, the complications from UTIs. That generation was given even less ability to speak about sexuality. And so when we know that when it's medically indicated that using vaginal estrogen cream can make a very big difference on reducing UTIs, when I work with women, I don't work with women that are in nursing homes, but I do have women that I work with that are in their 80s, that the hurdle to get them to be to even speak about the UTI. I mean, you have to be pretty desperate. Anyone who's had one knows it's terrible.
Yeah.
So you're desperate, you say it, but then you're given this vaginal estrogen cream, and so many of them like, okay, and then they put it in their, the prescription in their purse, and they either never fill it or they fill it and they never use it because they don't want to touch themselves, and they think that's gross or nasty, or like, why would you do that's impolite, and why would you ask me to touch my labia? I've never done that. Surely there's something else that I can do besides that. Or if they're willing to touch their labia, then it feels gross to have it on their labia and to be sitting in it. I mean, I've lost track of how many times I've been told those two things.
Yeah.
And I grieve so much for that generation. And I know that people in their 40s and 50s aren't far off from that, because we aren't being taught in our decades that we need to be focusing on our genitals. We should be comfortable with touching ourselves. We should be comfortable with who we are as sexual beings. And it stacks. If you have 80 years of that messaging and 80 years of not being taught something different, it literally becomes a life or death situation that could have been addressed differently with a better sex education that's holistic.
Well, and the fact that I have to warn people that I'm going to say the actual anatomic names of parts and not just say down there, but say vulva, labia, and vagina, which have no judgment value. They're anatomic, right? Just the fact that we have to warn people we're going to say those words in public, or that if you say those words in public on social media, you're likely to get banned for a while, which is absurd, but that's what happens. But that creeps into our upbringing. And I mean, I had a woman the other day, and though not surprisingly, and she was 80, tell me that she hadn't had sex with her husband for 25 years, which count backwards, that's in her mid 50s, which is not old, right? And so that kind of enculturation that probably started when she was a child, right? It's a lot of education to do.
Yeah.
So as you're writing a new position on sex and trying to change mindset, unpack just a few. We don't want to give away your whole book. Unpack a few of the 9 pillars of holistic sexuality. Sensuality, what is desire, what is pleasure, whatever you want to do, but give people a hint of what you're unpacking here.
Oh, well, great. Thank you. And I'm realizing I didn't answer one of your questions that you asked earlier, which was like the difference of genders.
Oh, yes.
And I spoke about like women are often the first adapters into it. But one of the things that I've really found in this work, and it's why I'm saying it now before we go into the pillars, is this isn't just women's work.
Yeah.
And just even on a bigger basis, we can't change the sexual culture if we're only changing it with one gender. It has to be everyone. Has to be. And I've realized that women, even though we are all, as we've said, not educated well, and we're not living in a good sexual culture, we do know how to connect. We do know how to get vulnerable, and we have places, we have workshops, we have places that we can go to because we have it organized under different subjects. Men do not have that in the same way. And because men don't have that, it means they don't have the topic, they don't have the practice, they don't have the safe spaces, they don't know what it sounds like, they don't know what it feels like. Yeah. So the leap to go to a group of men speaking about it versus a group of women is huge. And so the phrase that I've really adopted is that women are hungry to speak about who they are as sexual beings and to be asked about it. Men are desperate. And that wouldn't be a word that they connect with, but is true. And it doesn't take long for me to talk to a man who, it may start off as joking. Not all of them
Mhm.
are like that,
Mhm.
but it may start. But if I sit in the discomfort that they have, and I don't have to match them in the discomfort,
Mhm.
then men open up more than a lot of women and want to be different and want things to be different. They just don't know how. And it's often scary in a gender, I'm kind of stereotyping, but it's also true. A lot of men are going to be afraid to step into a place where they don't know where they're heading and they don't know what it's going to be like. So they're going to avoid it altogether. But they
Mhm.
want it. They want it. They want to have a better sexual life, and they want to
Mhm.
be in connection. If they are married to a woman, they're wanting that to be a richer place of their life. They just don't know what to do about it. And this framework is a beginning, because I've talked a lot about agency, and it's so
Yes.
important to me. And I think this intersects with sexuality, in that men have a lot of power and privilege. They do not have a lot of agency. And so asking a man, what do you want? Is this a yes or is this a no?
Yes.
They may have the muscle memory of having the power and the privilege of having options, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's authentic to the truth of what they know about themselves. It's more
Mhm.
performative
Yeah.
rather than authentic. And so when you sit with, especially a heterosexual man who hasn't had the chance to do this kind of deep work,
Uh-huh.
and you sit with him through it, I have seen some of the greatest transformations of anyone.
Well, and you do work with groups of men. You have a men's group you work with, and then, of course, a lot of women. So that must be fascinating because, my husband, and because I talk incessantly about midlife and menopause, um, when he's on the golf course, people are asking him things like, "Are they just making this up? Is this real?"
Oh,
Or, I
mm.
know. So from that level to taking him aside and asking real questions because there isn't the permission. It's so interesting you said they have the power to be performative, but not the agency to discover, because somehow there's a judgment attached with, "I was born this way, babe," or whatever it is, right? So that is so interesting to me that you said that.
I appreciate you giving that example, because that is exactly what happens, and it's whispered. And once whether it doesn't matter really what the gender is. Once somebody finds a safe person, they do want to talk. I mean, and say like people are lining up to speak with you afterwards because they know you're a
Mhm,
safe person to ask these questions to, and it's
mhm,
hard to find it. And if he is able to be that safe person for others, he's going to be sought after for it. And we need leaders to, in all genders, to be there. And when I see a man who steps into the truth of agency,
mm,
he becomes a game changer for communities. And because there's already power and privilege waiting for them, if they add agency as a part of it, especially in who we are as sexuality,
mhm.
it changes. The ripple effects are fast. And so it's why I refuse to be somebody that is negative about men or blaming men for this. I sit there and think they have less than room to be the truth of who they are than we do. It just doesn't look like that.
Yeah. Well, one uh of the one of the themes that you use when speaking about agency, you have taught for 3 of my retreats last year, and always teach agency in sexual health about being able to identify our yums and our yucks. And using those words makes it feel so approachable. Not what do you want? What do you like? But so go down that road for us as people are thinking, what are they talking about agency? How do I even start?
Yeah. Yeah, great. And that's the answer I was going to give when I was talking about the pillars. Is I think sensuality is the first pillar, because it's one of the best examples of tuning into the connection between your mind and your body.
Mm,
And that is the key to changing who you are as a sexual being, is really building self-trust that your body can give you clues, and your mind can hear it and you can act accordingly from that. And so I love asking people, is this a yuck or is this a yum? And how does your body tell you the difference between a yuck and a yum? And you're right, like the wording is on purpose because it can be a lot of pressure, like a spotlight is on you. And again, like I've sat with a lot of people in the I don't know what I want. And that is often a lot. There's a lot of sadness and sometimes anger associated with I don't know. It's overwhelming to even begin. But being able to say yuck or yum, most of us have a relation to that, especially if you think of food, that you can just like automatically like nope and yes to it, and it's as simple and as complicated as that. So it is a beautiful beginning of saying I'm going to slow down and I'm going to tune into the truth of who I am from what I know at this point in my life. And I have to have the audacity to ask the question. I have to have the self-knowledge to answer it. And I have to have the pause to listen in between those two things. And if you can do that on like, do you like this? You've seen me do like the types of touches. There's 4 types of touches. It's if you can do that with, do you like the way that your hand is touching your own hand, then you build on that when the stakes are much higher, when it transitions to, do you want this, do you not want this? And it's just a matter of, you don't start lifting weights at 100 pounds. You have to start at a smaller degree so that it's not jarring or harmful to you. And what I found, no matter what the age is, it's the rare thing that somebody walks in with a very big muscle mass of, no, hold on. Let me ask myself first. Let me tune into me to see if this is a yuck or a yum. And then has relationships where everyone's like, oh, please, yes, I'm going to do the same thing. And then let's share. Like, we just don't build relationships like that. And when you learn to do that, it changes so much, and you get to live. You regulate your nervous system when your body knows that you're going to listen to it. And when you have that kind of self-soothing cycle that is a muscle memory in and of itself, then you are much less reactive and you are much more truthful with yourself, whether that's inside a sexual connection or not.
Well, and if I give people examples of what I've seen you do, it becomes very translatable. I mean, in our retreats, you're simply teaching people, do you like soft feathery? Do you like, I mean, these are wrong, but do you like squeezing? Do you like tap? I mean, that is non-threatening and can be a dinner conversation, right?
Yes.
It's not something that we discover in the heat of the moment when it's not the right environment, but the exchange of conversation that allows us to talk at a deeper level about something that may be just a passing of time or an act, whatever. I don't want to categorize other people's experiences, but
Right. Well, I think for me, like, where my personal life really intersected with my professional in this topic was, it never occurred to me, and I didn't have any examples of asking myself the question, "What do I want?" And until I had a relationship that asked that of me. And I realized not only is it my like birthright, and like I have the right to ask myself that question, I also have the responsibility to. And when I realized I wasn't really being responsible with myself and my body, I'm not giving the impression that I was off doing all these things, which would have been fine if I was, but that isn't what my story was. It was, I was almost too afraid to do anything, because I didn't know what it felt like to ask myself what I wanted. I was positioning myself to please others, to do what looked good on the movie screen, to emulate what I thought was the right kind of sexuality and the right kind of person. And the details of my life was this intersection of, I wanted to be a good girl, and I did a lot in my outside of my sexual life to perfect that. And that didn't resonate with what my body and what my thoughts were sexually. There's like, oh, that's bad girl, good girl, bad girl. What does that mean? But then I was like, no, it's not bad. This is not bad. I'm not doing anything that's so bad. But yet I didn't know how to make sense of that dissonance. And I didn't know how to go about doing that. And it took me years to self-educate, because again, it's very hard to get any kind of information like this, and then to really do practicing with myself, and then in teaching others, learning from others. And sensuality, and asking, is this a yuck or a yum, was the best starting place, no matter age, no matter background, no matter gender, orientation, anything. It's a human skill that you want to hone inside and outside of sexual connection, but particularly inside.
Something you touched on, a word you said, triggered in me the thought that people often ask me, what's the number one thing I wish people knew or would realize about exercise or something, right? And I always go back to, I want people to understand that you are worth the daily investment in your health. But something you just said triggered that. It's almost like you have to understand that you are worth the exploration of what you want, right? It is so, you are worth it in and of yourself, unrelated to whoever your partner is, blah, 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 blah. Do you think there's a factor of why don't people do this other than never taught, all the feelings associated with it, but self-worth?
I think self-worth is absolutely an element of this. And I also think the worth of sexuality is questioned alongside of that.
Yeah.
So like, why is sexuality or sex important? Why is it even worthy? Like, what's it going to do for us? What's the good of it? What does it change? How does it change our life? If I have 10 other things I need to choose from, how do I know to position that? Especially if you've never had sex that most people consider good sex, or pleasure-filled sex.
Yeah.
And I think when we are so inundated with sexual messages, when we are given the script of what good sex sounds like, looks like in movies and TV shows and in literature, and if that's not the kind of sex we're experiencing, or if we're not wanted sexually, if we don't have a high sexual currency, depending on what generation that you've been planted in, then it keeps digging at your self-worth. And so sexuality is so positioned as a right and wrong, and no one ever walks in saying, I've got the right kind of sexuality, or the right sexual history, or the right sexual fantasies. It's almost always wrong, or it's like, I think it's wrong, like, can you tell me, like, is this normal? And anytime you have to ask yourself, is this normal, is this right, is this okay, it is cutting at your self-worth as well.
That's right.
And so you have to believe that you're worth it.
Yeah.
And you have to believe that this work is going to change parts of your life, that it's worth it to put the time towards. And it's a heavy lift, because we are taught that our sexuality is only sex acts. And I have seen that some of the biggest transformations in the work that I do with people is absolutely saying no to the things that are a yuck to you. And when you have the ability to say no safely, you have the self-worth to say no safely. It changes you greatly. And then when you can say yes from self-worth and not performance or pleasing, when you can say yes because you have not audacity, but you have the intelligence to bring pleasure into your life, and to know why it's good for you biologically as well as psychology of this, you get it. It just clicks into place, and you're like, why isn't everyone talking about this differently? Because you can see, like, there's the reductive moment in a movie after somebody's had sex, and they're like, boop, 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 and they just have this like spring in their step. and we all know it, and you don't have to have a lot of conversation in the movie to be like, oh, they got laid last night, but we all know the benefit of it when it's something that is truthful to who you are, that you felt seen and wanted and valued in that sexual exchange, that you were authentic to the truth of who you are. It's transcendent when that happens. like when you have a beautiful friendship where you've had this beautiful conversation exchange, or like when you see an incredible sunset, all of that is speaking to our souls. We
Yeah.
have just positioned sex to be different, and it just can't be.
As you were describing, uh, of expressing yourself, and then you said the word authentic. That is exactly what I was thinking when you were saying, when you can be authentic enough not to pretend for
Mhm.
whoever's benefit that that's a yum, when that's a yuck, and you walk away or whatever, roll over feeling like, "Ugh," but you're authentic enough to have the conversations or have the self-discovery of, that's a yum to me, I'll do yum all day, or that has to be liberating, right? So that it's really, and it, you said it, authentic, truthful, and it takes the work. But you also framed this whole conversation in a really interesting way, that you think sexuality should be treated by medicine and mental health as a vital sign, just as important as blood pressure. Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I think it is absolutely what it is as important as our for our longevity,
Hmm.
and for our mental health and physical health as any of the other topics.
Yeah.
And I think it's left out, like even like this conference that you and I were both at recently, that it's one of the few wellness conferences where they bring sexuality as one of the pillars of wellness and longevity.
Mm-hmm.
And they're correct. It is an important aspect of it. And what is often surprising to me, although I shouldn't be surprised, is we hear the statistic that money and sex are one of the two top reasons why relationships end,
Oh,
especially
yeah.
marriages.
Yeah.
And then we could all talk about why we think that's the case and how things fall apart, and we know all the reasons behind that. So if we know that is a statistic, and we know that the Harvard study that the quality of your relationships at 50 really do a lot of determination as to where you are in your 70s and 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that relationships have a lot of influence through even just who we are as sexual beings.
Mm-hmm.
Then how in the world can we, with good conscience, not have sexuality be something that is in the forefront, that
Mm-hmm.
is asked in all doctor's appointments, and not just as a checklist, but just truly like, so let's talk about your sexual health. And that we aren't training our
Mm-hmm.
physicians how to have those conversations. And as you know, I've said this a lot in front of you. As a therapist, I was lucky enough to get one elective class. I didn't have to take it, and Florida is the only state really currently that requires any class on sexuality to become a licensed therapist. That is awful.
Oh.
That is awful. And I've had to self-educate everything, just like with menopause. I mean, there's just so
Mm-hmm.
many crucial
Mm-hmm.
things that we didn't know. And so we have people who are human, they're not being sex educated through our education system, and then they become professionals that we're relying, like as a couples therapist, sex is going to be a part of that conversation if in most conversations with a couples therapist.
Yeah.
And if that person isn't personally comfortable with who they are as a sexual being, and if they aren't professionally being trained to be comfortable in that topic, and that is who you are relying on to help you through a very complicated thing, that's very tricky.
Yeah.
And I I know that you can live a great life without having any sexual acts as a part of it.
Mm.
And you can live a healthy life without sexual acts as being a part of it. Now, there's some stats that are showing that it does help with cardiovascular health, and there's
Sure.
some issues with the study, so I'm not completely getting behind it. But I'll tell you, there's no study out there that says sex is bad for you.
Hmm.
And there's no study out there that says it's detrimental if you are having the kind of sexual connections and relationship with yourself sexually that is authentic and true and
Mm.
agency filled.
Mm-hmm.
That's a zero. And I wouldn't believe it if I saw it. And I know couples who have mutually decided that the sex act is just not what they're needing and wanting,
Mm-hmm.
and they are vibrantly happy and sexual. They are sexual. They're just not participating in sex acts. They are holding hands, they are cuddling. There is a trend, something called lavender marriages, where it is a heterosexual woman marrying a gay man, and they are doing it in love and with purpose and intention and an agency. Some of it may be logistics for healthcare and for companionship, but that is a relationship that is not built in sexual act connecting. It is two sexual beings that are saying, this is the truth of who I am. Let's share a life together in truth. And it's why one of the last pillars is connection in the 9 pillars of sexuality, because connection is a vital aspect of who we are as sexual beings holistically.
Yeah.
And yes, there's sexual connection, but it's soul to soul contact. And if you believe that sexuality is a vehicle to know the truth of who you are, then sexuality enriches your connections with your friends, with your kids, with your parents, and you're not having sex with them. You are using the truth of who you are as a vehicle to be authentic, so that you can connect with people authentically and be confident enough to meet people where they are authentically.
That is really beautiful, Juliana. I was going to ask you more questions, but I think we cannot end on a better note than you're talking about connection and what it means to us. And so I want everybody who has been intrigued and touched and want to learn about the sexercises in your book and the 9 pillars and how to identify your yuck and your yums and exert your agency to pick up your book, A New Position on Sex. And Dr. Juliana is everywhere. She has courses that have been distributed worldwide. You should just get to know her work. Thank you so much for being here today, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining us on Hot for Your Health, where we bring you conversations from the bleeding edge of science, health, and culture. You can find links from today's show and connect with me at drvondawright.com. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. I'm Dr. Vonda Wright. See you next week.